Okay, hello, and we'd like to welcome you to this webinar with the State Department of Education, hosted by the Office of School Safety and Security. My name is Cindy Swearingen. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for the Office of School Safety and Security, and I am a retired, or sometimes called a recovering superintendent. But as a school superintendent, I was always looking for grants and just ways to make my school better. And one of the biggest grants that I did when I was superintendent at Beggs was the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant. So I wrote that prior to retiring, and we wrote that. It was a $4.1 million multi-purpose community use shelter building, and the grant was that FEMA would provide us $3 million of that $4.1 million. So it was certainly a huge undertaking. It's not anything that someone needs to think about in a day or a couple of days or even a week or a couple of months. Certainly a long undertaking, a process to go to, but oh so worthy. And so Beggs is very proud of that facility that is now being used. But we've got some great speakers here to talk to you about that. And so before we get started into our speakers, I would like to introduce you to Miss Michelann Ooten. Michelann is a school safety specialist with the Oklahoma State Department of Education, Office of School Safety and Security. And the great thing about Michelann is she has a wealth of information from the Oklahoma Emergency Management side. She spent 18 years with Oklahoma Emergency Management, so she really knows her stuff. When it comes to the emergency management, the FEMA applications and all of those, and she's helped lots of schools with that. So thank you, Michelann, for bringing this information to light. And I know as a former superintendent going through this process, I wish that I would have had someone like you hold my hand and walk me through this. So thank you, Michelann, and I'm just going to defer to you.
Thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. And welcome to everyone out there on our webinar today. I know when I saw the list of those registered, I saw certainly a lot of school officials. Thank you. I also saw a lot of emergency management folks I worked with for many years. So thank you to all of you for taking time to be on the call today. For some of you, yet another Zoom meeting, and I certainly appreciate that. Yes, I'm with the State Department of Emergency Management. Excuse me, there we go, my first faux pas. I'm with the State Department of Education, the Office of School Safety and Security, and we're here to talk about mitigation, planning, as well as those FEMA hazard mitigation projects that I know a lot of schools need, have worked through, so on and so forth. So anyway, I want to do a little housekeeping first, and then we'll get going. We'd ask everyone to start posting their questions in the chat at the end today, after we've had a couple speakers beyond myself speak. Then we will take all those questions. So we need you to start thinking of your questions as we go along. Please don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. Appreciate that. Additionally, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted on our website in a couple of days. So if you have any need to review and check up on a little bit of information to help you get your mitigation planning rolling or continued wherever you are in that process, then don't hesitate to check back with that webinar recording. So first, I want to tell you a little bit about our Office of School Safety and Security. So there we go. First, our personnel. We are a relatively small group at the State Department of Education. There's our director, Executive Director John Parker. You've heard from Cindy there. Lindsay Moore down there, our coordinator. She is definitely the glue for our office. You see my picture there. Steve Lynch is also a school safety and security specialist. And in fact, he and Cindy work the east side of the state. And the gentleman down there on the bottom right, Jason Gray, he and I work the west side of the state. So I know we've worked with some of you already. We look forward to working with all of you. So about our program, the first thing I want to tell you basically is what we are not. We are not an enforcement program, not an enforcement agency in this office, at least at all. We're not there to do anything except provide a resource to you, your school district, to help you in any areas of school safety and security. So now I can tell you what we are. Next slide, please. So what we are is we're a partner with school districts. We're there to help develop that culture of preparedness and again, be a resource to assist schools. We bring lessons learned, We capture a lot of information and serve kind of as a repository of information when it comes to school safety and security, what's worked, what's hasn't, there in our office. So we get a lot of questions from schools about a plan for this or a plan for that, and certainly trainings that's offered, which brings me to my next point there. We certainly offer ICS NIMS training and promote that. That's Incident Command System and the National Incident Management System. There, we offer some training, but we also certainly promote it in everything we do. Schools need professional development training. We know there's certain requirements on an annual basis, and we provide a lot of different trainings under the heading of professional development. So we encourage you to go to the Department of Education website, and if you need PD training, then look at that list. And if you don't see what you're looking for, let us know and we'll help you find a speaker to meet that need. We also provide a micro-credentialing program in the area of school safety and security. This is an online program that is certainly developed for the education community. I know we've had some emergency managers register and enroll in that program as well. So if you're interested, please work with your local school superintendent, district office, but also you could work through our office as well. But the foundation of what we do in the Office of School Safety and Security comes down to planning. We are out there working with school districts on their emergency operations plans primarily. We find those plans in different levels of development. We're there to help, in some case, enhance, some case help maintain, and in other cases, help to build that EOP from the bottom up. I will tell you in everything we do, we promote emergency management because it's also the bedrock of what we do. So when it comes to planning in all areas of school preparedness, hazard mitigation certainly comes up. So before we go any further, I'd like first to introduce our speakers today. Matt Rollins is with the Oklahoma Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. He serves as the State Hazard Mitigation Officer. Prior to joining ODEMHS in 2016, Matt worked with the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. He worked there from 2002 to 2016, and while there served as the State National Flood Insurance Program Coordinator. He was also program manager for the Cooperating Technical Partners, or CTP program, which is an innovative approach to create partnerships between FEMA and communities participating in the National Flood Insurance Program that have the interest and capability to become more active participants in the FEMA Flood Hazard Mapping Program. So welcome, Matt. Thank you for being here. We also have Jerry Gilstrap, who is superintendent of Stillwell Public Schools. Ms. Gilstrap has been in education for more than 30 years. This includes teaching French, English, and speech, and working as a principal and vice principal. Her tenure includes service as a member on the Oklahoma Association of School Teacher Leader Evaluation, a member on the Oklahoma Association of School Administrators, or OASA, Executive Committee, and the Oklahoma State Department of Education's Teacher Leader Evaluation Advisory Council. Last year, she was named OASA District 11 Superintendent of the Year. Superintendent Gilstrap is also a published author. Her book, Little Red Learns to Obey, was published in 2008 and had a second and third editions published in 2009. So welcome, Superintendent Gilstrap as well. All right, so about that hazard mitigation planning. I'm going to talk at a very 10,000 foot level, if you will, here. And for me, it comes down to focusing efforts on the hazards, disaster prone areas, and identifying appropriate mitigation action, as it says there on the slide. I think the best way to explain this is we are in February, and on an annual basis, we always think of severe storm season coming up in about 6 weeks. Although I want to remind everyone, as an emergency manager, severe weather or severe storm season continues throughout the year in Oklahoma. So anyway, but we focus certainly on time beginning in March, certainly April through about June. And when you're a school district, you think about, what am I going to do with those students and staff? How am I going to keep them safe? So the hazard is tornadoes or severe storms. And what are we going to do to mitigate that? Well, I can't, as a school official or any other Oklahoma official, stop tornadoes from happening. But I can look at the outcome of those tornadoes and how can we mitigate that? Well, a school safe room comes to mind, of course. And in most districts, funding is an issue. So FEMA and the federal government come to mind. So I will tell you, when it comes to FEMA funding, the first requirement for a FEMA funded hazard mitigation project is your jurisdiction covered under a hazard mitigation plan? In most cases in Oklahoma, hazard mitigation plans are at the county level. They can also be at the municipal level. And we'll find out here from Superintendent Gilstrap in just a little bit. They can be hazard mitigation plans simply for the school district alone. So how do you find out whether your district is covered by an approved hazard mitigation plan? Well, you contact your local emergency manager. And here's a map showing as of late last month, here was the status of those plans here in Oklahoma. This is at the county level. So you see those that are approved, those that are in process, and a handful of those that have expired. Keep in mind, county plans, hazard mitigation plans, have to be renewed every 5 years. So the moment you get your hazard mitigation plan approved, pretty soon thereafter, you're starting to work on updating it and getting it approved again. I will tell you, the map that you're seeing there of Oklahoma, showing certainly the green approved, the yellow in process, and the brown expired, is not unlike maps in other states when it comes to hazard mitigation plans. And keep in mind, here in Oklahoma, we are third in the nation when it comes to disasters. So emergency managers are always working a disaster, it seems like. So go ahead. And again, the best way to know whether your jurisdiction, your school, is covered under a hazard mitigation plan is contacting that local emergency manager. So now I'll turn it over to Matt Rollins, whose agency is responsible for administering those hazard mitigation funds from FEMA that come to applicants within the state of Oklahoma. So Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Michelann. Again, my name is Matt Rollins. I serve as the State Hazard Mitigation Officer. So I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about hazard mitigation planning and kind of what the role of mitigation planning is, the role of emergency management and homeland security is in mitigation planning, and briefly talk about a little bit on the funding that comes available through hazard mitigation grant program. So real quick, just to kind of do some quick highlights. Mitigation planning really is composed, main thing here is it's public involvement. It is not the state mandating what you do. It's driven at that local level. So this is made up of local community leaders, public involvement, stakeholders to identify your risks and vulnerabilities. And that can change depending on where you're at and just throughout the state and what kind of hazards primarily affect you. Some may be more prone to flooding, or others may be more prone to wildfire. So it is definitely driven locally. Second part, what we're looking for, and we emphasize through the mitigation planning, is those long-term strategies. How do we protect the people and the property in that planning area? So this is everything from things we can do now to long range. What can we implement in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, and even longer? How do we make your community resilient when you do have a hazard? Like Michelann said, we have hazards, we have tornadoes, we have flooding, we have these events, but how can we respond to them and recover quicker or minimize their effects so we can continue on with our lives? Again, how do we achieve that? We implement actions based on those strategies to protect people and property. So somewhat what we're going to talk about today will be safe rooms. So these are safe rooms that meet requirements to be eligible through the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Assistance programs to protect life and property specifically more based on life. So again, like she said, number one requirement is to receive a hazard mitigation assistance grant, whether that's through one of our disaster grants or through a non-disaster grant. Is a jurisdiction is required to either have or be a part of an approved and adopted hazard mitigation plan. So sometimes I get the question, well, why? Who said I have to do that? Well, there's the reason. Title 44 Code of Federal Regulations, which lays out the requirements of why you have to be a part of a plan, and then it also lays out the requirements that have to go in that mitigation plan. Sometimes we get questions on that. Why do I have to go through this process and have these discussions? Well, to meet that approved and adopted, we have to follow what's set forth in that code. We've provided a link there, hazard mitigation planning, that's at the FEMA side, which goes a little more in depth, kind of talking about if you're a state, if you're a local jurisdiction, or if you're a private individual, kind of what mitigation planning does and how you can become involved. So mitigation planning really at the state level really is composed of, when you do a mitigation plan, it's really composed of 4 components. As you see there to the left, it's number one, it's organizing the plan and its processes and resources. Number 2, it's assess your risks and capabilities. Third one, develop mitigation strategy. How do you as a community want to go and mitigate against that specific hazard? And there's multiple ways you can do that. And finally, at the end, which brings us all together, is adopt and implement that plan. So what we do here at the hazard mitigation section at Homeland Security and Emergency Management is we provide technical assistance. I want to put it out there. We don't write your plan as much as many people would like us to. We have a small staff. So what we really aim here to do is we help identify those resources, processes, and the direction how to complete those 4 components. So sometimes we often get the questions, okay, well, if I want to do this, how long am I going to expect to do this? Well, we've seen everywhere from 6 months up to 2 years. And mostly that is depending on that level of effort that you put into it and then the complexity. So if it's a single jurisdictional plan, maybe just a school district, they may be able to achieve that in a short time frame, 2 to 3 to 4 months. If you're a multi-jurisdiction county level with maybe a significant urban area, that's going to take additional level of effort and complexity. So hence, that's why it takes a little bit longer. As I mentioned before, if people are curious on who sets forth the policy and then what has to be met, that's right there. It is set forth in Title 44, the Chapter 1, Part 201. So some of the questions follow on, just to continue with that high level, is mitigation plans are required to be submitted and approved through my office prior to FEMA. So really kind of we basically all work in partnership. So we will work with that local community to have that plan approved and adopted. So it's ready to go down to FEMA, because if I have a small staff, they have even a smaller staff. And really what we're trying to do is fundamentally get you to understand how to implement that and use it in your community. So one of the main things that communities we are trying to get you to understand is you go through that entire process. So components 1, 2, 3, and number 4, critical at the bottom, number 4, is you have to adopt that plan. So once you complete your plan, and it's what we call approved pending adoption, APA, you may have a plan, we've approved it, but it's not formally in effect until it has been adopted by your governing body, your city council, or in this case, your school board. So that's a critical thing, as sometimes we run into that issue as well. I'm good, I'm approved. Well, you got that one more step. Plans are effective for 5 years. Sometimes we have to question, well, how do I get an extension? By statute, there is no extensions. There is no mechanism to allow for an extension. So once you hit your 5th-year mark and you have not updated it and adopted it, it goes into that expired status. We highly encourage you to work with them in your local planning area to encourage multi-jurisdictional plans, especially for some of our areas. You have many small communities that don't have the resources to pursue their own mitigation plan. So work together at that county or some type of multi-jurisdictional level to get that plan done. So it's fundamentally at the state. Our goal is we want to be that green. We want to have everybody approved. And then last but not least, I have my own plan I'm required to keep updated. So annually I am required to maintain the state hazard mitigation plan. Currently, we are in the middle of our 5-year period. So that was last approved on January of 2019. So essentially January of 2022, we are going to start our update cycle. So we have to go through the same process you do. So that's a little bit on mitigation planning. So often the question comes up is, okay, I've got my plan, I'm approved. Now I'm interested. I want to go pursue a safe room, or I want to pursue a mitigation project. Where's the money? A little bit, we're going to talk about a little bit about kind of the funding. So right now, in the last 10 years, around 66.4 million in hazard mitigation funds have been approved through FEMA for deployment to the state. Out of that 66 million, 29.9 million has been used for school safe rooms. So we're right about close to 50%. So part of that hazard mitigation funds can be used to fund and update hazard mitigation plans, whether that's hiring a contractor, whether that's helping offset staffing costs, hiring, bringing in an individual through your school system to update this. So there are some funds available. So real quick, I want to spend just about a couple seconds here. So majority of our funding comes out of what we call disaster grants. So every time there's a federal disaster declaration, that comes out of that federal disaster funds. So my funds, so when you hear of a state or a county being declared for a federal disaster, that 66.4 million, that money comes available 1 year after that. So that's why there's kind of always this lag. Sometimes we have to explain that is, yes, we've been declared, but for hazard mitigation, we don't see that money until 1 year later. And then finally, kind of on projects, a lot of times we have multiple project types. It's more than just safe rooms. We do things like sirens, we do emergency generators, acquisitions of flood-prone properties, drainage projects. So there's multiple types that are eligible to multiple different jurisdictions. So one of the things that we want to make sure that communities understand is these projects are reviewed and recommended by the state hazard mitigation team to Homeland Security and Emergency Management for submittal to FEMA. So we've got that team is set up by statute. So what they do is they provide an ability to take it out to other individuals to look at projects, look at their benefits, and determine who's all eligible, and then it's submitted up for recommendation to be submitted to FEMA. So with that, I will turn it back over to Michelann and for questions later on.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. I know that was a great foundation piece for everyone to start understanding what hazard mitigation planning and the requirements for a plan are. Certainly more information to come within the questions from the chat. So that's my segue to everyone to please be putting your questions in the chat. Okay, next we have Superintendent of Stillwell Public Schools, Jerry Gilstrap, to talk to us about, as I mentioned before, her district decided to have their own plan, to develop their own plan. I know she worked with her local emergency managers as well. I appreciate that. And then she'll talk about how the plan certainly helped so they could get a school safe room. So go ahead, Superintendent Gilstrap, and thank you for being here.
All right, and thank you for the opportunity. Well, I am Jerry Gilstrap. I'm the superintendent at Stillwell Public Schools. We are in Northeast Oklahoma. We're a 4A school, very high poverty area. So our students have lots of needs and our community has lots of needs, and we simply did not have the funds for a fine arts building, auditorium, and moreover, a safe room. Our community did not have a safe room at all. So we decided to pursue a FEMA grant for this purpose. And the first step and the most important piece is the hazard mitigation plan. And of course, I went to the city and county first of all, and they were working on updates. So there was not an approved plan. So you can't move forward without this plan. So we decided to do our own standalone plan and develop that before we could even start on the grant. So this is a process. You have to be very patient because it can take, as Mr. Rollins said, it can take some time to go through the process to get your plan approved and then move on to the grant. So if your city and county does not have a plan that's up to date and approved, you can work with them if they do, and that's wonderful. But if you don't, you can also do a standalone mitigation plan, which is what we did. So I would suggest getting some guidance from a grant writer that is familiar with FEMA and FEMA projects, so that you can fully understand the process as a whole, because it is one that takes time, and although very worthwhile, you need to have some guidance on how to go about doing all of this. It is an extended timeline that could span actually a few years. So I would also add, when you're in pursuit of that guidance and a grant writer, you really have to go through your proper procurement procedures to obtain that person. So you need to follow your legal policy that you have, I'm sure, in your district. Our plan, again, is a standalone plan for our district. And then, as Mr. Rollins also said, you have to collaborate with all of your stakeholders, key people such as your fire chief, your county officials, the city officials, historic society, the community as a whole. So you have planning meetings, you send out surveys to stakeholders. It's all part of the overall process. And then you will assess your risks, such as tornadoes, wildfires, flooding, high winds. You also have to survey who lives and works within the surrounding half-mile radius to figure square feet and capacity that will actually be allowed for your project, what you're looking at. Our plan ended up being about 6 pretty large chapters, and it included purpose, assessment, risk assessment. We had mitigation workshops with key people in the community, and also for our Board of Education to fully understand what we were getting into in order to pursue this safe room for the community and our staff. We noted through the assessments that we do experience tornadoes. We have some flooding, we have winter ice storms, just as I'm sure most of you do, hail, high winds, wildfires, and that there is absolutely a probability of future events in our area. Then you also rate your location by class. For example, class 4 is very high and class 5 is extreme, meaning you have a higher percentage of seeing those events. You also have to do an inventory of your assets in the hazard area. So you look at you inventory your buildings, and you value all of your buildings as well. You have to state your strategies, go through goals and objectives. For example, if you want to pursue this grant to reduce danger or to give adequate warning during potential events, you want to protect facilities and life. You build your concerns into your school planning and into your budget. You could embed educating your stakeholders, how to prevent loss of life and loss of property during such crisis events. And then you go on to your maintenance procedures, how to implement the hazard, how to actually implement the plan that you're developing and putting in place. So you've gone through your strategies, you're going through your goals, you're going through your objectives. You then list actions as well in the mitigation plan, what it's going to take for you to accomplish your goals, such as educating students in safety procedures or providing walkways to and from certain buildings. And then all of this is attached to a timeline, and then the cost of each of those actions as well. So you go through implementing, you meet again with key community people. You do that a lot through this process. You document your sign-in sheets for everything. You document everything. Sign-in sheets for workshops, planning meetings. You'll need to send out surveys to stakeholders and utilize data to evidence that there is support from your stakeholders and community. I always say, though you walk through the valley of data, you need to have the best data in the valley, and that is so true for your mitigation plan. You need to make sure that your data is good and that it evidences true facts that support the project and the need for the project in your area. So I would reiterate at this point that getting your hazard mitigation plan completed correctly and then submitted for approval is vital, because you cannot move forward in the process until this happens. So it has to be approved by FEMA. And also building those working relationships, as Mr. Rollins knows, those individuals such as Mr. Rollins are key to your success in this process. So you need to have good working relationships and find out who those people are. The approval timeline on average is about 9 to 12 months, but can take longer if again, as he said, you're not working persistently on it. So when you're looking for guidance, I would do your homework and research grant writers and make sure that their work ethic aligns with yours. So your plan that is submitted in a timely manner, and then the process thereafter will go quickly as possible. And again, I want to say that your regular procurement process to find this guidance person or this grant writer, you must adhere to your procurement policies to employ that grant writer. And then once you finally get the plan approved and you're really feeling victorious, because you will, then that's when the work really starts on the actual grant to get your project funded. So you can, since legislation passed in 2018, you can roll the cost of your grant writer into the grant. So that's awesome now. Once you get through the grant process, the grant is submitted and it gets put on a shelf until a disaster happens, which we hate to say that, but once a disaster does happen, that is when your funds will become available through FEMA. So for these projects, FEMA pays 75%. And your district pays 25%, or if you're fortunate, you can have a local donor, or you could run a bond to pay your percentage. And I have on the slide, our cost was approximately 20 to 25,000. There are a couple of different ways you can do that. You can find a grant writer that will help you with your plan and then manage the actual development of the grant after that, or you can have two separate people do that as well. Once your grant comes off of the shelf, then you'll be notified that it has been taken from the shelf and is being completed. The review and all of that, you're going to go through a bigger process even after that. Hopefully, after doing some revisions and going back and forth, then you're going to receive a funding letter. And then the work begins to bid out to get your construction company, all of those things. So, and again, your bidding, your procurement, all that, go through your procurement policy. You also need to know that once you procure your constructor, you will pay forward your construction costs. And for me as a superintendent, that was very key. Because then you send that into FEMA to get reimbursed. So basically you wait for payment from FEMA. This could take 6 to 8 weeks for each payout. So you really have to plan ahead and have a plan to pay it forward, especially if you didn't have a bond or you don't have an individual donor that's helping you with your 25%. Then after the building completion, some things that I'm sure you're wondering are, who opens the building? If it is a shelter, how do you decide who has what job in the safe room? And you can see the pictures on our slides of our safe room, and it is a dome, and we were very excited to get a dome. It's very temperate, and the cost actually of electric and some of those things are very low. Very nice facility, and we've only been in it since fall of this year. So I will also say you have to develop a crisis management plan, or I think Michelann had mentioned an emergency operation plan. We actually had a team go to Maryland to get NIMS training and to be trained to start the process, and then this Safety and Security Department, along with Cindy Swearingen, helped us develop the full plan so that we have, it looks like a phone tree of who is going to open the building. Are we going to open it when there's immediate threat or sirens? all those things are lined out in your emergency operation plan, your crisis management plan. Being rural, we know most of our people, so we are going to know most of our people that come in from surrounding businesses if there is a threat. And of course, during the day, all of our staff, all of our children, our students would go there. Our population of just Stillwell is around 5,000. The county's like 22,000, but Stillwell's 5,000. Our auditorium, as you can see in the picture, seats about 650, but the building holds about 1,250. On each side of this auditorium that you see, there's a band room on one side that kind of curves around the side, really large, nice room. And then chorus on one side, band on the other. And then we have bathrooms, a family bathroom, janitor closet, large lobby area, and a huge stage. I think in the next slide, you'll see that stage, but it's just been a wonderful, wonderful building. And of course, you can see how open it is. So for the community, for a safe room, it's just a huge asset. You know, Stillwell has never had one. So this whole building was about $2 million. FEMA pays 75 again. Our LEA matches the 25%. If you can get it bonded, great. If you can get a donor, great. If not, you need to have a plan. You've got money saved, or what you're going to do with that. So I think my last slide, this is after the sod was placed around the building, and it looks so much better. This also is a picture of before the seats were put in the auditorium. So you can see the spacious stage. And then on the side is one of the very first things we did. And of course it was during COVID, masked up, we spaced kids out. We had a FFA leadership conference in the auditorium. And so my staff has been so excited, not only to have a safe room for ourselves and the community, but to have a multi-purpose place that we can hold different events. And so we're very excited about it. So in closing, I would just say this is a process. It's taken several years to get it completed, and it does take work and a lot of time, but it's worth every effort for your kids and your community. It took about a year. It took about a year to get our mitigation plan approved, and then we went right on through the process. And then it took a year when we started construction, almost a year to build and complete. But good things come to those who wait, and it'll just build your resilience to wait. But thank you for the opportunity. That's our experience.
Very good. Thank you, Superintendent Gilstrap. We really appreciate that. You walking us kind of step by step through the process of first securing your approved hazard mitigation plan, and then how it was to take the next step. And it sounded like you did a little bit kind of at the same time to be able to submit the application to get your safe room. So anyway, with that, I think we'll turn it over to questions. Cindy, do you see one you want to first start with?
Yeah, let's talk to Matt about this. Are mitigation plan grants submitted through the FEMA grants portal, or where are they submitted through?
I actually just replied to Paula. So if you're requesting a mitigation grant through like a notice of intent, it's through, so we have a state online system, okemgrants.com. So if you want to do a notice of intent for a mitigation planning grant, or if you're interested in a community safe room, that's where you would start. So our process is a notice of intent. Once what we call an NOI, once that NOI is approved, that leads to an application. And once you complete the application, then it is at the time, if there is funding available, those are put forth to the state hazard mitigation team. So currently to date, there are no funding opportunities. We do have a recent disaster declaration for the ice storm back in October. But again, like I mentioned earlier, we don't know our funding until about this time next year. So we are in that position right now. If you want to submit a notice of intent and an application, you can submit those. You can submit an NOI and an application throughout the year. There is no specific time, but you got to understand is that sometimes funding can be limited. So like Superintendent Gilstrap said, you may have to wait. Sometimes we have those cycles where we have funding, and other years it's smaller amounts of funding, and some years we don't have any because it's a lot of it is disaster driven. So if we kind of go through that, it's kind of one of those weird things. I get funding from disasters. So if we have a quiet couple of years, I don't have money, but if we have some active years, we have money available from those federal disaster decks. But I did put in the link there. If you can register and submit if you want to do an NOI or an application.
Okay,
So,
and Matt, this is kind of a three-part question. I'm kind of pulling three questions together for one. So can you submit an NOI, which is a notice of intent, for multiple items, like say for fencing, and does it, or does it have different mitigation items? Does it have to be a dome, a big safe room, or can it be some smaller grants?
yeah, so kind of a couple, a jurisdiction can submit. So there are project types. So you gotta understand, number one is that we have to be mitigating for a natural hazard. So sometimes we get these questions that are more related to what we call man-made hazards, like like a system like going to school, like a fire suppression system. Those are not eligible. But if you're looking to do like wildfire mitigation or put in like an outdoor warning siren, maybe you have a community park or an area that doesn't have that, or like a community safe room, yes, it is done through that. So partly that's what we do with that NOI. That's the beginning of the conversation. You submit what you're interested in, and then that's our opportunity to start that dialogue to say, yes, that qualifies, move forward, or that's not eligible, or there possibly is some eligibility, but you would have to look at it like this. So it's our opportunity just so you understand the program, and kind of what we'll try to do if we can, if we know of another entity, if it's an ineligible project, if we know of another funding source or another agency, we at least will try to do our best to say, hey, you might want to go talk to the State Department of Education or the State Fire Marshal, somebody like that. Contact them because they may have ability to fund that grant. So at least try to get you that resource or that option to pursue. So yeah, I don't want to go into all the type of projects we fund, but it's really do that NOI. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay, so this one will go to Superintendent Gilstrap. So the upfront money that we have to place first is sometimes large amounts of money, and some smaller districts can't do that. In your experience, have you seen the reimbursements from FEMA happen on like a rotation? Like, can you count on them like every 60, 90 days, or do you have to be prepared for a longer period of time for that reimbursement?
Well, and Matt could probably piggyback on this. Look at him grinning. We've worked together now really for several years. And so they're really good to work with. And I felt like I badgered them sometimes, but school districts, you need your money. You can only pay so much forward, and then you've got to have that money coming back in. And so I would say for the most part, there were, I think, 2 payments that extended out, that I had to call the construction company and say, hey, can you just give me another week? And they were really good. And I would say the construction companies too, if they've worked on FEMA projects, and you normally get people that bid on them that have done those particular projects, especially a dome, because it's such a specialized area, they understand FEMA funding. And so if it does take longer than 6 to 8 weeks, because most of them I would say were 8 or 9 weeks, I got reimbursed in 8 or 9 weeks, but there were a couple that were longer than that, but we worked it out. But I definitely wanted to mention that because you need to be prepared for that.
Okay, and I think this was mentioned earlier by both Matt and Superintendent Gilstrap area as well, but it comes up a lot in the conversations that I know that I've had. So as a former superintendent who went through this process, who wrote a plan, a school district specific plan, as well as the school district grant, is there anywhere floating around, or how do we find out about those people, those grant writers, those lists? I always know that, well, there are people out there who can help you, but how do we find out who those people are? And I know who I went through, and Jerry, I think we went through the same one, but Matt and Jerry, you might attack that, because that's the question we get asked most. Who can do this for us?
Well, I always come from the state's position. We don't maintain a list. We're in a sense by statute, we're not allowed to maintain a list of preferred vendors. That's handled by another state agency and they don't have something like that. So we get that all the time. Who can I contact? What I always recommend is do just like you would when you're procuring anything for your school system. Ask around, do some searches, maybe contact some neighboring school districts who may have gone through this. But us at the state level, I'm prohibited from saying, go call ABC or XYZ, because it looks like I'm lending that I have a preferred vendor, and we're not allowed to provide that. So at least that point, I can just say, and you did mention it, if you do contact a contractor, do your due diligence. Go through them, look at their references, talk to other school districts that they've worked with, find out other ones more than they just provide. Maybe talk to some other districts. Did you use that contractor or that vendor? And try to get the best picture you can that who you're working with and what you're going to be expecting from them. Because fundamentally, at the end of the day, the agreement is with you as a jurisdiction and that contractor. We have very limited ability to go in and get involved in a dispute between you and your contractor. So that's what we always caution is do your due diligence. So I'll leave it at that.
And I would piggyback on that, but really your best research is with your other districts. It's word of mouth. And really that's how I found out about who we used. I happened to be in a meeting but your network of the administrators that you work with, because you will come across superintendents and other administrators that have built safe rooms. And then it's just an ongoing discussion of, what was your experience? Who did you use? And then, yes, you absolutely, like we researched, what construction companies could build a dome, because that's not every construction company, and not every construction company wants to bid a structure like that. So we actually had, and I won't say a name, but for the top of the dome, they were out of Texas, because they do lots and lots of FEMA projects. So it was subcontracted out to different companies because of that, because they were experts. That was in their wheelhouse. But like Matt said, you really have to research and talk to as many people, network as many people as you can to find out who they used. Was it a good experience? And same thing with grant writers. That's really where you find out who you can use. I'm not sure that there is a list.
Okay. So Matt, you might be able to help us on this question has come up. Kind of a do as I say, not as I did type situation. So we didn't know that there was money for planning, to developing that plan. So when I was superintendent, and I don't know if Jerry's experience is, we were out $20,000 just to write the plan, and then come to find out, oh, there's hazard mitigation dollars out there to help pay for that or have someone write that plan. So can you talk a little bit about hazard mitigation planning dollars? Where do we get that? Who do we talk to about that? And how do schools get that ball rolling? You're on mute, Matt. You're muted.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay.
My phone was also ringing too. So one of the things so every dollar under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, so briefly, we call it HMGP. HMGP is the dollars that we receive for hazard mitigation through a federal disaster declaration. So to break it down real quick, out of every dollar, it's broken into 3 pots of funds. 7%, so 7 cents of every dollar goes to mitigation planning. 5 cents of every dollar goes to what we call initiative projects. Those are things like outdoor warning sirens, weather radios. So, and then 88%, the remaining amount goes to what we call our regular projects, things like safe rooms. So to kind of back into your question, so yes, planning funds are available, but it's like I said, it's 7 cents of every dollar. So if you just do some basic math, if we have $1 million declaration, we're only going to get 7% of that available for planning dollars. And you understand that. So the priority that we use for planning dollars is number one is going to update those county plans. So if we have 10 counties come in and request planning assistance, planning funds to update their county plans, our priority is always to get those county plans updated first. Then we try to see what else we can fund. So if there is funding available, we try to do it in that manner. So yes, so unfortunately, there's never enough planning money. I'll just be honest, is that's always, that money typically goes the 5% goes the fastest, 7% goes, because there's always people needing assistance on planning. The big thing is you can't mix your planning assistance dollars with a regular project, a safe room. So they have to live separate. So that's why we have to be careful. And that's part of that application process. That's that dialogue I will have with you to say, okay, some of this is eligible, some of these activities are not. And then we try to figure out a way, can we do it? Or sometimes I have to be the bad guy and say, no, we can't do that. It's just not eligible. So, because the last thing I want to do is approve something, fund it, and then later on say, well, I'm sorry, you got to pay me money back. That's never a fun conversation.
And so I would encourage everyone to look at that map that you had earlier, or Michelann, someone had earlier, with the counties in red, where the hazard mitigation plan is outdated, and look at that. And then who do we go to, Matt? Jerry, who did you go to? I know I was told to go to my county commissioners and talk to them about when would their plan be developed. I wasn't good at waiting, so we went ahead and moved forward with our district one. But Matt, who should we talk to about if our county's in red? Who do we talk to?
I would recommend talk to your county or your local jurisdiction. Talk to that emergency manager.
Okay.
So they're the ones they're the director of their local program, whether that's at the county level or a municipality. Engage with them. They're the ones who we primarily work through. So if you want to know, and we encourage you to participate. If they've started their update and you've received an invite, please participate. Or if the plan is approved, get a copy of it, or sit down with the emergency manager for 20, 30 minutes over the phone and just say, hey, I'm a new superintendent, or I wasn't part of that update. How can I be involved, or what does it tell me? This is kind of something, it's easy for me to say, hey, it should be easy to read, but we all have a lot of things we got to be doing. So, sit down with that person who represents your county, your local municipality, and go through that. And then I ask them, when are you starting your update, or how can I help? Or if there's someone on your staff that you might say, hey, I can have, I got a teacher who's willing to help. Any way you can help that emergency manager, keep that updated and keep it moving forward. We definitely encourage that.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have one more question, and Michelann, this one's for you. So again, we're so thrilled to have Michelann as a part of the State Department of Education that knows the ins and outs of emergency management. Because a lot of times we felt like we were working with this entity or this entity. Now with Michelann, she can marry the two and dovetail the two. So Michelann, you working now at the State Department of Education and having the experience in emergency management, can school districts reach out to you to kind of help solidify some of these questions? And the water's still probably real muddy for people right now. So can we reach out to you, or school districts reach out to you to kind of hold our hand and walk us through that process?
Absolutely. Thank you, Cindy. I do love continuing to marry the two agencies, if you will. And I am happy to be that first person that school districts contact to be able to get their question answered. I typically know who to go to over at the Department of Emergency Management to be able to get that question answered. But I always encourage those phone calls, those emails, those texts to first contact their local emergency manager about their questions, because again, a wealth of knowledge is right there in their backyard. So, and I'm typically going to go to that local emergency manager as well and say, hey, what's going on? How can we help in this particular situation? And I always find those local emergency managers eager, excited to help. And oftentimes, in fact, most times they know the person who has contacted me, and there's already a partnership there. So it's good to report. Thank you. Thank you, Cindy, for that question. So I tell you what, we've had great questions. I appreciate everybody participating in the chat. I appreciate everyone being on the webinar today, especially our speakers. Thank you, Superintendent Gilstrap, and thank you, Matt Rollins. These are great folks who I know would be available to answer any of your additional questions. At the end of the presentation here, you'll see my contact information I'd be happy to send additional questions their way. Before we get to that, though, I want to talk to you about a survey. We will be sending out a survey to everyone after today's webinar. And remember, the webinar will be posted on our website. As with any survey evaluation piece, we appreciate your input. It helps us to improve future webinars. And in fact, I want to tell you about the next one coming up. We have monthly webinars through our office at the Department of Education every month. And the next one actually, we are overachievers this month. We've had 2, or will have, on February 18th at 1:30 p.m. This one's will be about options-based thinking. So please plan now to put that on your calendar and plan now to attend. We'd appreciate seeing your smiling faces at that webinar as well. And with that, I think it turns it over to my contact information. And again, I appreciate everyone for being on the webinar today. If you have additional questions we didn't get to, please, or just need general information, please don't hesitate to contact me there at my email address. So with that, please take care and stay safe, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.